Hi, Nancy.
Hi,
Hey, how are you?
good, good. How are you?
Good, good. Looking good. I like your backdrop. Very nice.
Yes, great colors. I like the
Hmm.
blue on the,
Yeah, I like your jacket too. That looks cool.
thank you. So it's warm today in Seattle, or for Seattle, it's warm. I'm
Oh,
in Seattle at the moment.
that's good. You know, all day today, it's ever since, well, yesterday, it's been just pouring rain and thunder and lightning and dark. And finally, it's actually brighter right now at what time is it? 8:30 almost. It's
Right.
brighter now than it's been all day long.
It's hard in the up here in the West. The hottest time of the day is usually 3-4 o'clock at night. Whereas like down in California or whatever, the hottest time of the day was 1 or 2. So
Right, right.
hello, John.
Hey, John.
Hello, Nancy. Hey, David. How are you?
Great. How are you doing?
Good.
Good.
My wife just got back from her week vacation.
I was wondering when she was going to get home.
Yeah, she's all recharged.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
glad to hear it because she was sure anxious to go.
She sure was.
Where'd she go?
She found this cabin that's right under Mount Rainier in Washington.
Right.
And it had everything. It had outdoor barbecue and she had a jacuzzi and the whole works. So it had like a river and lakes and waterfall trails.
Wow, sounds great.
And she was mentioning about they had a super moon last night. And she said she just couldn't believe it. So she was up till 1:30 in the morning watching it. So she came back with a lot of energy today. I told her to give me some.
Wow.
I could use it. How's your week, Nancy?
They just seem to fly by. I don't know where the time goes.
I know the
Well, I do. I mean,
Yeah.
every day is busy,
Yeah.
which is good.
Yeah. I forgot your cat's name again. What was it?
Uriel.
Uriel. Okay. How's she doing?
Oh, she's really taking to the place. Yes, she's a sweetheart. So
Good.
yeah.
A pretty cat.
Does she like the patches? Or
I don't think she needs any patches, right? She's a baby. She's a
Give her a
baby.
decade or two.
Yeah.
Our cat that just passed wore a lot of patches, but,
right.
but this one is maybe something to calm her down. But no, she's enjoying her kitten life. And
Oh, she's a kitten?
well, she's a year old, but
yeah.
she can, from a standing on the ground, she can leap up on the countertops. And
Oh yeah, at that age, yeah.
yeah, so she's all over the place. And she's decided she likes to eat paper, so she's chewing up things all the time.
That's how she gets her fiber, huh?
I guess. I don't know. I don't think the dye is very good for her, but
No.
My son, his cat, loves to eat the labels off of all the Amazon packages. So all the Amazon packages he gets, the cat just takes all the labels off and chews them up.
Oh my gosh.
He doesn't swallow them though.
He doesn't swallow, he just chews and spits them out. I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe he has something against Amazon. I don't know.
No, Barbara's joining us, sir. Probably get a few people joining like late. You have to maybe start and then
I tell you,
it'll be a great recording to have online though, as a reference for people.
Yeah.
So shall we start? Is that?
Yeah, whenever you're ready.
We're ready.
Hey, Barbara.
Hi, how are you?
Hi. Fantastic. Thanks. How are you?
Who is that man in the picture?
Which one? The
One
one
with
with
the light blue
hair
shirt?
or John?
Yeah, that one.
That's the way I used to look.
Too funny.
You still look, you look at least as young as I am,
At least as young as I am.
which is 64 years young.
64, you're a child.
Yeah, you're.
That's what my
you-
wife says.
You look very young for your age, John. I'm only 61.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
So I have something delightful happened to me in the last few days, which is related to the X39 patch. And that is, I had my major health crisis when I was almost 50. And my mother came to visit me and she was almost 80. And so at that time, people said we looked like we were sisters. They wanted to know if she was my sister. So she was 30 years older than I am. Now, I was on a Zoom call recently with my youngest brother, who's 10 years younger than I am. And people were asking whether he was my husband. So, I'm assuming that I'm looking younger because he didn't look like he was all that old to me. But
Oh, that's awesome.
but yeah, I thought that was pretty cool.
I'm trying to bring up the video. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to bring up be on the video. And it's not there. Do I have to go back to where I signed in?
I think you just need to choose start video. There
Just
should
start
be like
video?
in the lower
maybe,
left-hand corner. There
There
you
we
are.
go.
yeah,
There
there
we
you are.
There I am.
So I'm Dr. Nancy Flournoy. I'm a professor emerita from the University of Missouri. I've spent my career doing, I'm a statistician. I've spent my career doing clinical trials and largely methodology for how to do clinical trials and how to analyze clinical medical science. And I have, of course, fallen in love with the patches, the Lifewave patches, and getting a lot of personal use out of them. And I have enjoyed trying to find out as much as I can about how they work. So this is part of a series. I'm at today's talk is about X39, and of course we've all heard a lot about X39. So I'll try to say a thing or two maybe that we haven't focused on before. So let me share my screen. It's disabled. I need permission from you to share my screen. David.
David.
Just
He's
one moment.
resting.
I'll do that now.
Okay. So, and let me get it started here. So today we'll talk about the X39 patch. Those of you who know the Lifewave patches know that the patches are designed to increase a particular peptide. And each patch is directed towards a different peptide, and the mechanism is the crystal on the patch, which uses your body heat to reflect a particular light wave into the body to increase the peptide. So in the case of, there's a real nice discussion most of the papers that I reference are in the science section of the Lifewave website. So Thomas and Helen Brzezinski did a number of the early studies on the Lifewave patches, and they have a real nice discussion of some of the basics about how the patches work. We won't go into any of that detail here, but X39 was designed to elevate the GHK-cu. Cu is copper peptide, and this is called the anti-aging peptide. So we have this slide from Lifewave Corporation, which lists the benefits that have been documented to the point where Lifewave can say, you know, the patch does these things. So there's quite a list, and they don't necessarily seem that connected, but they are. So we have minor aches and pains, a healthy immune response, supports wound healing, enhances sports performance, increases mental clarity, improves your skin, energy, vitality, and a faster recovery from exercise. So, so that's those are the things that have actually come out of the studies of the X39 without considering the copper peptide separately. Now, what I want to talk about today is the first. So we'll talk about what is the X39's patch's connection to this copper peptide. What is the copper peptide's connection to stem cells, and what do we actually, and what is the peptide known to do? Because if, as has been proven, the X39 increases the copper peptide, and the copper peptide's been proven to have other effects, then there's a straight and natural connection. So just to summarize the studies, just really at a flash here to begin with, I mean, the first question is, does X39 really increase the peptide it was intended to increase? And there are 3 studies in the back science section of the website, Lifewave's website, that explicitly documents that the copper peptide does increase with the application of the patch. And there's a couple of pilot studies and then a double-blind, much larger study that confirms the peptide that was targeted, it does increase. And this is really nice. Not all the patches can be documented in this way. That is, some of the peptides that are targeted, you can't measure. You know, there's no assay or no blood test. So you can't say that what was intended actually happened, and you have to infer it from the other effects that can be documented. But in this case, it's pretty well, it's established that the peptide, the X39 does what it was intended. So I'll just mention the 2 other studies before we go on here. There is a study that demonstrates increases in neurotransmitter production and improved metabolism. And there is also a brain mapping study. And the brain mapping study has some nice colorful pictures, but the science behind it is kind of complex. So we'll see about that, maybe. So X39 increases the copper peptide. What does the copper peptide do? Well, this Dr. Lauren Pickert is the one who first isolated the GHK without the copper in 1973, and he continues to perform many studies on it. It's really been his life's work. And the story goes that stem cells in the skin are thought to arise from enlarged hair follicles. So here you have a little picture of the skin and a hair follicle, and it gets bigger and it gets bigger, and then they start to see these stem cells coming out of the area where there was the big hair follicle. And they found that GHK was directly involved with this process. So that was one indication that GHK increased stem cells. And then there is another report that if you took liver cells from patients, if you took old liver cells from old patients and you put them in the blood of younger patients, the older cells started functioning like they were much younger. So these were the first indications that stem cell production is going to increase with the copper peptide. Now, over here on the bottom right, we have a picture of a stem cell, and stem cells are often connected with this word pluripotent. And what that means is that the cell becomes like it was in the embryo, and it's able to grow into not just one thing or two things, but into anything that the embryo would produce. And so if you can reprogram a cell to be a stem cell, then it can be more than 200 different types. It can grow into more than 200 different types of cells, depending on what your body needs. So here's a little picture of stem cells and a little, few of the things that might come of it, which, as I say, there's 200 is a lot. Now, in terms of thinking of the copper peptide and aging, well, we have most of it, it's very common in the plasma, which is one reason you can measure it. You just need a blood sample. And the amount that one would find at age 20 compared to the amount one can find at age 60 is, significantly reduced. So we produce less as we age, as we do with many common things that we need. It's also found in the urine and saliva, but also in tissues. So the peptide is found all over the body, the kidney, the brain, and lesser amounts in other tissues. So how might it be that this GHK makes old cells young again? Well, the postulate's been made in 1980. Pickert, the person that discovered it, proposed that it acted by regulating the way copper goes into the cell. And copper is very important. I'll show a slide on that later. But so the first thesis was that it's the peptides acting with the copper that makes it act like a stem cell. And in 2009, Pickert was saying pretty much the same thing, that its ability to bind to copper and modulate the copper in the tissue was a key factor to how it functioned. But 10 years later here, which is fairly close to now, Pickert and his associate is saying that recent gene data may challenge this mechanism and demand more studies of how it works. And in particular, in this last study, what he did is he got one of these big gene databases that exist now, and he compared he looked at how GHK affected what the various genes did. And he found that, I think it was like 50 genes started functioning upregulated. That means they were increasing their functioning, and another 50 or so were downregulated. And there's a long list of what these are and what they do. But he's saying that even though the relationship of the copper peptide to copper may be very important, it's not enough to explain its effect on all these genes. And so there has to be some more learning in that regard. Now, we're not going to go through all of these, it's just a list because in the next talk, we'll talk about X49, which also has copper in it. So this is just to show you that copper by itself, obviously in connection with other things, is important for a lot of enzymes and for a lot of different kinds of metabolism. And for the discussion we're having right here, it's a third function that is more related to the neurotransmitters. That is, it has a signaling function that tells the stem cells that stem cells require in order to divide. So it's one thing to sort of make something become a stem cell, but you actually have to have it replicate for it to be useful. So there's a ton of studies out there that show the effects of the copper peptide in mammals. And this is just sort of a brief categorization of them. We talked about the hair follicle enlargement studies. Also connecting X39 to stem cell development were studies in wound healing. And early on, it was clear that from the military and other places, burns, I guess a lot of studies in the burn field, that if you had X39 when you were trying to heal a wound, it was going to heal a lot faster. I'm going to come back to the skin remodeling here, but it helps in injury recovery, and if you have ulcers, and if your intestines need to be repaired. And it really just is virtually any piece of the body that was in disrepair that they have studied, they have seen some indication that it is going to facilitate a healing. Now, the skin remodeling, I'm still trying to get my mind around that particular word. And in fact, it's interesting that I've started to hear that word on TV recently in connection with Botox, that they're talking about, like remodeling your face with Botox. And okay, well, in the case of the studies with the copper peptide, there are synthetic versions, so you can take pills or injections, and it will improve your, it'll decrease wrinkles. It will make your skin tissue better. It's going to make you look healthier and presumably feel healthier, be healthier. And of course, in the case of X39, we don't have to take injections or have other treatments. You can have your body produce it directly. Now, the remodeling. So one of the features of tissue that they talk about with the remodeling is increased elasticity. And I don't know how many of you have experienced this with X39, but I have. That is tissues becoming more elastic, and not just in the skin. I mean, really in the bones and throughout. So some of you might know I had a serious head injury when I was a child, and was at, had near-death experiences when I was about 50. And then I started finding my way back out of it. So here we are today, and I still are having massive changes in my skull and my cheekbones and my jawbones. And it's not like they're rigid. It's like I get a wave of fluidity, the body's trying to continually elongate and straighten up, and the waves go through my body, and I swear they go through the brain. I mean, there's nothing that stops this sense of motion. And it makes me really wonder about, my own brain integrity. If for a little bit, it's like, okay, I'm concerned, but it doesn't seem to, there doesn't seem to be anything wrong with that. And everything gets straighter and straighter and straighter. So I think that for people who have structural issues, the X39 is really quite amazing. And see, they list bone repair down there. So they know it affects the bone as well as the skin. It's quite amazing. So I'm not going to go through this whole list, but Lauren Pickard again in 2018 made a list of benefits that the peptide has. And just to highlight a couple of things, defense against cancerous tumors, regulates, regenerates nerves, and helps with the nervous system, prevents damage to genes, helps repair tissue. And here's the item about making the skin more elastic, and I would argue making the bones and other tissues more elastic as well. So it's a long list. And now I want to turn back to the studies on X39. So I mentioned this one earlier in the context of showing once again that X39 does increase the copper peptide. But this is a paper, a report on work by Melinda Connor and her colleagues, and she's been doing a number of recent studies for Lifewave. And so she looked at not just does it increase the copper peptide, but she looked at a whole lot of things that are sort of summarized over here on the left, a whole lot of metabolic measurements, physiology measurements. She had questionnaires about, how are you feeling, and as well as established memory tests and mood scales. So she has this whole battery of tests, and she studied a number of patients who wore the patches 8 to 12 hours a day for 7 days. So just after 1 week's period of time, showed that they increased 8 amino acids, and I'll mention those in the next slide. But they specifically, one thing that they sort of held in common was rebalancing the gut, which of course is important because to be healthy, you've got to be able to digest your food. There was also an improvement in the quality of sleep, and overall, the patients, the subjects, I think they were healthy. The subjects were 63 years old, so it indicated a substantial improvement in quality of life. So these are just a couple of details from the studies. That is, the metabolic activity that increased was in dopamine and serotonin. And of course, they're the dopamine, a happy drug, and serotonin is as well, but it's also very important with respect to making melatonin and helping you get a good night's sleep. And so these are all consistent with generally being healthier. And the enzymes in the liver were increased or changed, whichever way they needed to be, in order to regulate neurotransmitters, which is the communication system and is what was indicated is needed for the stem cell development. So this is now I have just a couple of slides on the brain mapping, and I tried to make this simple. The first time I went through it, it's not so simple at all, but let me just see if I can convey a couple of things. So Doctors Chavalier and Clark measured electronically cognitive response, brainwave patterns, cognitive control, visual control, and task switching. And so they took each participant and looked at them 3 times before patching, after 3 weeks, and 6 weeks after. And the subjects were patched for 12 hours a day. So these are the kinds of pictures they get. For each subject, they have a picture. And it's a heat map, like we've seen from some other studies that Lifewave has done. And so the blue is really too cold. And you see it getting some color by the end of session 3. And if the subject had, you know, in the second case, they're too hot. And again, they normalize a bit more. So they can measure measure these differences. One of the things that I find frustrating about these kinds of studies is that they're really, it's hard to get objective about it. You end up, I mean, the subjective impressions can be really dramatic, like when you see the ice wave heat maps on the horses getting better, etc. But they can also be, you know, kind of fuzzy learning. But what he claims he does is come up with these 3 concepts: coherence, which means that the interactions between, so imagine I've got all these electrodes on my head, and I'm looking at how they're communicating with each other. And if there's measurable, there's a measurable electrical measurements sort of in the center, which say that communication is good. And then there's hypercoherence and hypocoherence. And hyper is there's too much crosstalk. Everything's going this way and that way. And it's like if you've ever been in the situation where you can't shut your brain off, it's just talking too much. And everything's locked together. And then hypocoherence is there's just not enough discussion. So he has those three concepts. And then he ends up with pictures like this. And again, these little circles, just imagine they're electrons on my head. So you've got all these electrons on your head, and you're looking at the frequency and the voltage with which signals are being passed from one place to another. And you have at the top session 1, and then session 2, and then session 3. And again, the red is hypercoherence. So they tended to have people come in this study. For the most part, people came in with brains that were too busy. And that's indicated by the red. And the 3 different columns indicate different wavelengths. So we have theta, alpha, and beta. And all of the wavelengths are too busy. And then by session 2, you see the reds just really disappeared. And in fact, most of the activity is, I mean, some of the brain is fairly quiet even. And by session 3, there's a little more maybe normal activity. That is, there's a little bit of orange, a little bit of red, but not, it's not too cold and it's not too hot. So what they concluded was that the brains were initially hyperactive, that subjects had an increase in their reaction time at session 2, but it didn't last. But that over the 3 weeks, the voltages all came to a normal level and stayed at that level until the end, until they finished the study 6 weeks later. And then in terms of verbal reports, they reported that the subjects felt better when they were finished. So as I say, I take, it's interesting, and it would be nice if there were an easier way to summarize it. So I say that, Lifewave does not claim to treat any medical illness, and that if you have a medical problem, you should talk to your doctor about using one of the Lifewave products. And with that, I will thank you for your time. And I will stop the screening.
Thanks, Nancy.
Thank you. Very good.
Thank you. So,
David, would you like me to give the testimony about my eyesight?
sure.
Okay. I've been nearsighted all my life. And at age 12, I went into hard contact lenses and loved them, wore them all my life. I am 79 years old, and with the X39, I got them right away and put them in the positions that are directed on the back of the neck one day, and then down below the belly button the next day. And on the third day, I could not wear my hard contact lenses because my eyes had shifted in size, meaning my correction was no longer what it was before. So I had just been to the ophthalmologist, went back over there, told him what happened. In fact, I couldn't put them in. I had to put glasses on to drive over there. And of course, he couldn't believe that in 5 days something like this could happen. And so he took me in the back, tested me again, and he was blown away. Oh my, you are definitely changed. Look at the numbers here on the paper 5 days ago, and now look at your numbers. So I just ordered and got your new contacts, and they're not going to fit you. We're going to have to throw them away, $150 down the drain. But I was ecstatic because it's the first time in my life that I had vision changes. So I went into soft contacts, and it has not stopped changing. Now, this is what, over 2 years now, David, the patches have been out, I believe. And I wear them every single day, one or the other, and in different places, of course. And my eyes are still changing for the better. I have to go every few weeks and get new soft contacts to correct my vision ability to see.
Isn't that wonderful?
Really, really heartwarming. And I know other things are changing too. My hair is thicker than it was. As you can see, it's very gray. I have wrinkles that have gone down tremendously and so on. So, but the eyesight, that's unbelievable.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I as part of my accident, I lost the ability to track. I couldn't hit a baseball. I couldn't do basketball because I couldn't follow anything in the air that was moving. And so I can now catch a ball, which I couldn't do. I mean, I'm 75, so like 65 years I haven't been able to catch a ball. I can catch a ball, but I can also, there's stuff happening in that eye, and I don't know what. But I'm anxious for it to evolve to the point that I do know what, because I think I'm just on kind of pins and needles waiting to see what it's going to do.
Eye exam on that eye?
Hmm?
Have you had an exam on that?
Oh yeah, and
eye?
I wear glasses, so at some point.
Did they see any difference? The ophthalmologist?
Not.
No.
Well, I haven't been for a year, so I not yet. I mean,
Okay.
they
Well,
did think they'd seen this. So right before X39 came out, they thought they were seeing the start of macular degeneration. And the next time it was like, well, you don't have macular degeneration. There's nothing there. You know, it's like, so, I mean, there've been some changes, but whatever's happening is not finished because I can feel it, you know,
Yeah.
I can feel stuff going on.
Wonderful. Keep us posted.
Yeah, okay. And I wear so many patches, you know, some things I think I can clearly attribute to one patch or the other, like this plasticity. I mean, it's just amazing.
Well, and I've worn the patches since the very beginning. I started with the company even before they'd come out to the public. So I had energy patches before anybody else. And I've worn them all every single time a new one came out. Of course, I got them. And I did some of the early research too. And so with the X39 and so on, David obviously had to go to much higher capabilities of research than what me and Dr. Haltwanger could provide at the time. And
Oh, you were working with him?
I was,
Yeah.
yeah, I drew the blood and collected urine on many different groups of people because as a nurse, of course, I could do that. And then got the labs back and sent them in to Dr. Steve and David.
Yeah, I've tried to contact some of the, you know, the researchers that did the early work, but, you know, they've retired or moved on and nobody answers. So it's an interesting transition time. And I'm so glad that Melinda Connor and her daughter Caitlin are on board because
Well, they're very high class research.
they are very high class, but they don't have, I mean, they have the medical background. They understand the medical community very, very well, but they don't have that electrical, you know, they don't have that engineering background that some of these others scientists had that were working. And it would be really nice to have someone who is, you know, does things with biofield energy and that's active.
And that takes a large equipment.
Yeah, I suppose so. I suppose it's, I mean, it's all expensive. So where are you and where was the research done?
I'm in Arizona
Uh-huh.
and in the mountains north of Phoenix. And I did it right here because I was working as a nurse midwife and nurse at the time. And so I passed the word around my hospital and signed up people for the studies. And then they would line up outside my back door on whatever day they were going to get their blood drawn and hand in their urine samples. And then I documented it all and sent it into the labs and got the lab reports and of course sent them to Dr. Steve and talked to him about it. And then on to David.
So anybody else got a X39 story to tell? Okay, well,
I guess my X39 testimony is, it's been working so well, and I got to figure out a way to put myself in an undesirable condition so that I can get an effect.
yeah, I just wake up every morning and think, wow, it's another day and I feel so good.
Yeah, it's almost like it works too good. And when you're trying to bring new people in, that's always in the back of my mind is they're going to have this result and they're going to just think it's normal after that. And so you really do have to get them to these meetings so they can really figure out what's behind it.
Thank you all for coming.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Nancy. Thanks, David. Thanks, Quila. Thanks, Barbara. Thanks, Carolyn.
Really a good one.
Thank you. It
Thanks,
was
everybody.
great presentation.
Thank you.